What is the most fricked up thing your parents said or did to you? This isn't the most fucked up thing, but is the most fucked up thing I'm comfortable with sharing. One year for Christmas, my dad asked me what I, 9 male at the time, wanted, and because we were going through seriously traumatic problems that resulted in major financial difficulties, I chose a cheap and practical present. A calligraphy pen set because it also came with normal nibs I could use for school, and maybe I could try and learn calligraphy. I wanted to be as non-burdensome as possible, knowing our struggles at the time. On Christmas Day in the morning, I opened my singular present, and it was just underwear. I was disappointed, but knowing our struggles, I let it go. Later in the day, we had a big celebration with the family at my nan's house, and all my cousins were there with their toys, and I was really kinda down about it. Eventually, we ate dinner, and then we were allowed to open the presents that were under my nan's Christmas tree. That's where the aunts and uncles put everyone's gifts. My parents had bought the set I wanted for all 25 of my cousins, all girls between the age of 8 and 11, and didn't get me it. I fucking shit you not. I got nothing but socks from my aunts and uncles that Christmas, an ungodly amount of socks that weren't even my size. They kept saying, you'll grow into them, but I took up smoking weed a few months later and never grew taller than I was at age 10, so none of those socks actually ever fit me in the long run. My nan pulled through though. She had just come from holiday and bought all the girls these incredible gold necklaces and souvenirs from her holiday. She gave me also socks, but at least they fit. The thing I hate about this story is how much time I've spent thinking about it in the years since. It's been 30 years and I'm still pissed off about it. Christmas Day a few years back, my mother opened a Christmas cracker that had an Elvis joke on it. I made a quip about him being into young girls. We have a brief back and forth about it because she doesn't buy it. I don't think she's actually being seriously passionate in her defense of him. She isn't even a fan, so I just keep teasing and not taking the argument seriously. I mentioned that he met Priscilla when she was 15, and my mother turns to me, looks me in the eyes, and goes, well, Stag's in the hospice. How old were you when you lost your virginity? For context, I was raped at 14, and she'd finally learned about it the year prior. I burst into tears, and Christmas dinner was ruined. She even briefly tried to turn to the other people at the table and laugh at my tears. She said something like, oh, she's crying now, or whatever, but she was just met by looks of disgust, and then went very, very quiet. My tears weren't enough to deter her, just the judgment of other people, something that now doesn't surprise me at all. Realized this year how abusive she truly is and finally left. Turned my whole life around since. But I'll never forget that she said that to me. I think a lot of things about her, but I never would have thought my own mother would use the fact that I was raped as a child to one-up me in a debate. Where do I begin? Dad abandoned me and was in my life for maybe 3 months max. That's probably being generous. In 25 years. Mom used to beat the shit out of me regularly, like bang my head against the wall and call me all types of names. Threatened to marry me off to some random 35-year-old man when I was 16. Threatened to abandon me at an orphanage when I was really young, like 10-ish. Tell me that they're going to kill me as they beat me, and I believed them. They're both okay people now, which makes me all the more angry. Feels like I wasn't worth changing for when I was an innocent child that needed love and affection. To this day, my mom blames all the punishments she inflicted on me. She says it's all my fault because ever since the day I was born, I was annoying and cried too much. She claims that because she worked as a single mom to raise me and get me through college, that I should be grateful for all she's sacrificed for me, with no acknowledgement of any of the harm, no guilt, the lack of affection and physical comfort. She wouldn't even give me a hug. And she often says things like, what's the point of working so hard to raise kids if they won't even come see you? The worst of it, they gave my dog away to strangers. I still don't know what happened to Jake. Not my parents, but my ex-wife used to say the most foul things to me before we separated in hopes to get me to put my hands on her. When she failed repeatedly, she started telling our 3 children things like, "I'd rather each of you have a different father than your dad be the father of any of you." Or, "Titus, when you grow up, promise you will be a real man, not like your father." Or, "Your dad doesn't love us, he loves his other family." At the time, the only thing I knew to do was leave the house when she started acting that way. I found out that she still kept telling the kids horrible things even after I would leave in hopes it would stop. She eventually got her boyfriend to go to the sheriff and tell him I was molesting my children, which immediately got DSS involved. They realized quickly that it was all bullshit. When they tried to take the children from her, they were stopped by the county courthouse. Her grandmother is a clerk of court there. She still has the kids, and I barely get to talk to them. I can only imagine what they are told daily. I miss my children. My life has been empty since. My dad was physically abusive ever since about age 7 or 8. The worst thing he did was around age 16. He grabbed me by my throat, lifted me off the ground, and slapped me through the wall into the second living room. He was in the Army Reserves, an engineer. He served a few tours in Iraq, has PTSD, and many other terrible ailments. I'm 31 now, at the moment staying with him to help him sell his house. It's the first time I've seen him in about 12 years since moving to California. How is he now compared to how he was? Much better, of course, hopped up on drugs, and he needs warning if you're coming up behind him. He most likely will punch you. The VA got their act together and actually helped him. It's pretty night and day, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't see a part of the old him recently. My stepbrother is very college frat boy, like late, drinks. Dad hates it, but deals with it. He's done a wonderful job. But I've seen him verbally come unhinged on him. He's still broken, and the only things saving him are medication and therapy he receives in video calls. But he's a much better broken man. When I was 7 or 8 years old, I used to do really good in school. One day, I got an 8 in a test instead of my usual 10s. I did great in school because I was scared of my mom. I came home, told her. She got mad, put some stuff of mine in my backpack, and sat me down for dinner. She told me she's disappointed and that I am a terrible person, and this dinner will be my last, as she doesn't want a child like me in her home. I was crying and eating while she was berating me. When I was finished, she threw me out of the house. I was still crying, trying to come up with a plan in my head to survive, to try and call my dad. I remember thinking, I am going to wait outside for my dad, but what if he comes out the back of the house and doesn't see me? Will I live outside forever? My mom kept this blank, cold face on until I was a few meters away from the house, and then completely switched to a nice, warm, smiling face and welcomed me back into the house on one condition: never disappoint me again and get an 8. I was living with my parents at 16 years old, and my older siblings were away at college or out of the country. My dad told my mom he was leaving her, and my mom went into a downward spiral of depression. My dad left the house, leaving me with a very depressed mother to look after. I remember she locked herself in her room for 3 days. I begged her to open the door. I went in and fed her. My dad would come back occasionally to the house to get something for his new place. They told me not to tell a soul about their marriage falling apart, not even my siblings. One day, I got home from school to an empty house. The police came saying they had a call from a counselor saying that my mom is in danger and may hurt herself. I completely broke down. Luckily, she didn't do that, but she got checked into the hospital for a while. My dad stopped by that night, and I told him about it. He kind of just shrugged. I was completely alone. It was a horrible time. We are all okay now, though, thankfully. I will never forget I was 7 years old. My sister was 4 or 5. My parents were getting divorced, and I don't know what went on with the courts and all that stuff. My parents' custody agreement, at least in practice, was very informal, and I was actually raised by my grandparents since I was 6. Anyway, my mom and dad were with us at a park, and they were fighting about who the kids would live with. They said to us, "Who would you rather live with, mom or dad?" And I'll never forget thinking, my mom is kind of crazy and a waitress. My dad has a good job. And running over to my dad and my mom crying. My sister followed me. I don't know if that logic occurred to her or if she was just following me. Stayed with my dad for a few months before I was sent back with my grandparents. I lived with them until I was 15. My dad insisted that never happened, but he was an alcoholic at the time, so maybe he just forgot. I don't know. But I remember it very clearly. I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness, those people who go around knocking on doors and giving out their literature. They're also the people who don't celebrate holidays and die rather than taking a simple blood transfusion. I've left the faith a while ago. Anyway, I'm like 5. Every morning my mom made me read the Bible and memorize scriptures. If I failed, I lost privileges. One morning, she's telling me how very, very soon, like in a couple of years, maybe sooner, the government is going to outlaw our faith, hunt us all down, and execute us. Mom puts a finger gun to my head with a big smile on her face and asks me, "What are you going to say to the soldier when he asks you to give up your faith or he'll kill you?" I'm shaking and my lip is quivering, so I don't answer. I really can't answer. She gets impatient. "Honey, you have to die for Jehovah to get into the paradise world." I tell her what she hears. She hugs me and kisses me. That was 21 years ago. Still no death squads hunting down Jehovah's Witnesses. My parents had a double standard between my brother and I when we were growing up. Not sure if it was a boys will be boys mentality or what, but he was 5 years older than me and got to do whatever he wanted. He was out of control, skipping school, partying all the time, getting in trouble with the police, and belligerent to authority. It went on for so many years, and I was always angry as I witnessed it, especially when they became hyper-focused on me and held me to a different standard. To this day, my brother has not been able to live independently without their help. He is 47 years old, and they are in their 80s and still will not tell him no when he needs money. I love them, but nothing has changed all these years later. They still bail him out. I told my mom that he won't know how to stand on his own 2 feet when her and my dad are gone. But no one has ever listened to me because what do I know? My mom locked me in my room because I couldn't sleep in my bed most nights growing up. Hell, I sleep on the couch still to this day. And I would try to sleep in my dad's bed. I had to go to the bathroom and she wouldn't let me out, and I ended up pissing on the floor and passing out. And I think I also had my period at the same time. I remember blood getting on my carpet at some point, but I can't remember when. My dad broke everything I had in one room and gave me a trash bag to clean it all up because I lost a disc and he was tired of me. Other than that, I don't know, I just kind of got yelled at a lot and I was never really able to find a job or anything to make them proud of me, and they openly told me I wasn't supposed to exist. They don't really like me much. I was told by my parents if they didn't see it happen, they couldn't enforce anything regarding sibling conflicts. My sister used to put knives through my door, pull all the phones in the house so I wouldn't call 911, and cut me up. She bullied me relentlessly, started rumors in school based on my being raped as a kid, and so much more. She was never punished, and I had my hands tied. I punched my sister in the stomach once, completely out of sight and earshot of my folks, and I got grounded for a month. I was taught that if I did something, no matter what, I'd be punished. If she did something, I needed a notary present for my folks to ask her to stop. Last year, my dad had the gall to ask me why I never told them why I let her continue the abuse. So I guess the most fucked up thing my parents did to me was raise me. When I was 12, my dad took me to New Harmony State Park to go fishing. He got drunk and passed out on a picnic table. After 5 to 6 hours, he came to, but was still trashed, and he forced me to drive home. First ever driving experience. When I managed to help him into the car, he passed out again within a few minutes. About 20 miles or so into the trip home, he woke up. He looked over at me and kinda growled, "You little motherfucker." Then he just started hitting me. He started crying as he was hitting me, which made it even worse. I was scared to death. 12 years old, driving down a highway, getting beaten while driving, and really hurting to see my dad in that condition. I don't know if it's the most messed up thing him or mom did, but it definitely made the top 10 list. My dad sexually abused me from 2.5, probably earlier, but that's my first memory. Until my parents got a divorce. When I was a teenager, we argued a lot and she said horrible things. Sometimes she told me she knew and should have done something. There was a few signs, but she didn't know. She told me I was just like him and how I was as horrible to her as him. Throughout childhood, when I was naughty, she threatened to send me to go live with him, even after she knew. And the worst was when I was 17, go and live with your father, then he can play with you as much as he wants. Oh wait, you're too old now. That shit's burned into my brain. We've come a long way, but I still haven't forgiven her. I'm sure there'll be worse in here, but when I was around 7 years old, I started struggling with hallucinogenic anxiety attacks, which made me absolutely hysterical and terrified as a kid. They were triggered by my fear of the dark, so they began ensuing during bedtime. My parents, who were only concerned with the sleep I was interrupting, solved this problem by locking me outside of the house in the cold night until I cried so much I lost all of my energy and gave up. I actually still haven't been able to learn what these hallucinogenic anxiety attack episodes were to this day. As a 22-year-old, I sure as hell wasn't given any medical attention when they were happening, obviously. Can confirm this experience traumatized the hell out of me. There is a laundry list, but here are the worst ones from my mom. Sperm donor is too awful to discuss. When she called me a liar when I told her I'd been raped. I was 13. When I was 12, she told me she made the biggest mistake of her life not having an abortion when she was pregnant with me. More recently, she was bitching because she thought my hair was too long, and I refused to cut it. She thought about it and said, "Well, if you do chemo, it's kind of a moot point, huh?" And then laughed. I had been diagnosed with cancer a week earlier and still didn't know what the treatment plan was going to be. In April will be 5 years since she said it. After my divorce, when I was a quivering mass of grief and raw emotion from having my life and the lives of my children completely torn apart, my mother declared, without knowing anything about what went on inside my marriage, "You have problems with me. You have problems with your sister. You have problems with insert ex-husband's name here. The divorce is all your fault." I won't bore you with the details, but the divorce was very definitely not all my fault. Then she proceeded to invite my ex-husband and my kids to her lakeside home for vacation every summer, causing me to lose 19 days of custody time with my kids every summer. I was largely estranged from my mother for about 7 years as a result. Oh boy, I've been waiting for this one. My fiance and I moved into a place that my parents owned to help them financially, but also in like a rent-to-own situation. It had to do with taxes and their retirement and a bunch of other shit. Anyways, in July, we had a fire. Ruined everything in the house. Found not to be our fault at all by both the fire marshal and the insurance fire investigator. They blamed us for everything, trashed all our outside stuff, took our down payment money, and multiple other things. I haven't spoken to them since. They also forced a wedge between my brother and I, causing us to also have a fallout. Life is lonely. My mom tried to drown me. She was washing my younger brother in the bath. I was bothering them. She told me to stop. I didn't. So she grabbed me and shoved me into the tub and held me under the water as I clawed at her. Years later, when I was in my teens, it came up. She denied it, told me I was too young, around 6 years old, to remember that, so it never happened. Then, in my late 20s, she brought it up and laughed it off like it's something that happens when raising rowdy kids, and I wouldn't understand since I am not a parent and have never had to deal with kids. She never apologized for it. My mom sent my sister and I on a plane from California to Colorado to stay with a man she met online. We stayed for an entire week without her. Let me say it another way. My mom met a man on the internet. My mom lives in California. He lived in Colorado. She was cheating on my stepfather with him, and we met him once during a weekend stay in Lake Tahoe. A month later, she thought it was a good idea to put my sister and I, 13 and 15-year-old girls, on a plane to Colorado by ourselves to spend a week unsupervised with a man we met one time over 2 days. My dad threw me at the kitchen table and chairs once. Picture a bowling ball. That was me. Threw me at the inner garage door, ripping my shirt another time. My mom would inflict emotional and physical pain often. Tried to burn me with a lighter once. They would often use physical violence or emotional abuse for punishment. Obviously, I wasn't having that. My dad and I are better, but my mom and I never got along. She's kind of a judgmental, rude bitch that loves to yell and thinks she's always right no matter what. I'm not into that. I'm also 51 now. She's still the same. My delusional dad calls her a saint. Ha. Hey everyone, I wish you all the best. Can I just say, from personal experience, help is available. There are trustworthy therapists out there who specialize in trauma, PTSD, and even religious trauma. No matter where you are in your healing journey, we can all benefit from support. There are coping strategies and effective methodologies. Be sure to find someone who is licensed. Their credentials should be available on their website or online listing. And if they aren't, don't be afraid to ask. CBT and EMDR are two modalities, types of therapy, which often help with trauma. If you're looking for a place to start, be well, everyone. My bio dad would do a body inspection on me twice a month. It wasn't just looking, he would touch and fondle me and make me go into certain positions and stare at me while he wrote in a notebook. He did those to me from when I was 3 to 14. My mom divorced him 3 years ago for being abusive to her and got full custody, thankfully, and a restraining order against him. He was arrested for trying to rape a 6-year-old last year, and while he was awaiting trial, he hung himself. I'm so happy he's dead. We still don't have that notebook, by the way. My dad is schizophrenic and delusional, so that messed me up one way, and my mom. When she divorced my dad, she decided that I was the abusive one because I was a teenager who wanted to live like a normal kid and not be constantly put through therapy and on meds. On numerous occasions before I reached adulthood, my mom tried to pave the way for a conservatorship of me so that I couldn't leave once I became an adult, and as a result, ironically enough, through therapy and evaluations, I've been diagnosed with PTSD, medical PTSD, and generalized and social anxiety. Dear God, we have 5 kids, 4 bio and 1 adopted, and we love and cherish our kids. I would die for them. Most of them are adults and we have very good relationships with all of them. They are our friends. I am so sorry for all of you that have been neglected, abused, and unloved. I want to hug you all. Please get into therapy, find people who love you unconditionally. Set boundaries and love others like you should have been loved. Break the cycle. Much love. Love, a mom and grandmom. My mom, who had attempted suicide when I was 8, got into an argument with me when I was 15. She locked me out of our glass front door, walked over to the gun cabinet, got a revolver, and showed me it was loaded. Then held it to her head while she screamed at me about how she's worthless and my behavior was unacceptable. She didn't pull the trigger. She must have just had enough that day. I don't know why. She's still alive and well today, thank goodness.